The story of Hank Williams is a true story. Hank Williams was the greatest country music star, as well as the country's most profound songwriter. They never wrote them, and they never sang them like Hank did. Not a great deal is known about Hank between the time he bought his first guitar for $3 and his first recordings. Through his young teenage years, Hank began writing songs. And in 1946, he was signed as a songwriter to a publishing firm in Nashville. But only when a small recording company requested a new vocalist did Hank get to record his songs. These records, rough and unpolished, sparked enough interest for MGM Records to sign Hank to a recording contract. There was something about Hank, and it wasn't just his style or talent alone that made Hank Williams an instant favorite with the people. By the end of 1950, Hank Williams had joined the famous Grand Ole Opry and had chalked up 10 giant hits in a row. Hank was years ahead of his time, and soon his style had changed the music almost completely. He was not just a star, he was the future of country music. But Hank saw himself as a country boy, and the ever-rising commotion confused him. He took continuing medication for severe pain from a back injury, and sometimes when he could hardly stand up and walk on stage, he would turn to the bottle for help. He suffered a stormy marriage, and yet, from his own personal pains, his greatest songs began to emerge. In 1951 and 52, Hank Williams rose to become the top country star in the world. His songs were being recorded by popular singers. He was the hottest songwriter in the country. His records sold in bigger quantities every day, but Hank was leading a tortured life. In fact, he lived the hurt that was written into the lines of Cold, Cold Heart and his many other spine-tingling and haunting songs. He talked and wrote about death, and he was convinced that he would die in a very short time. His performances became trouble, and often he could not finish his show. And yet, where other artists would have lost their fans, Hank just became more popular. He was bitter. His moods, like his songs, grew more and more depressed. The Grand Ole Opry, which even today knows Hank as their greatest star ever, decided to fire Hank Williams from their show. They never did let Hank return, and yet today, Hank's name is thought of whenever the word Nashville is mentioned. For most of us, Hank Williams is country music, and he always will be. On New Year's Day of the year 1953, Hank Williams drifted off to sleep in the back seat of his car while being driven to a show. He had vowed to straighten out his personal life, and reports are that he was succeeding. But Hank's body was weakened by childhood illness and the hard life he had been living. Hank Williams never woke up to 1953, and the exact cause of his untimely death is still disputed today. He died in the same unbelievable way he had lived. And friends, Hank Williams was only 29 years old. 2 months after Hank's passing, his most famous song was released. And though it may be hard to imagine, Hank never saw the fantastic reaction to his immortal "Your Cheating Heart." Hank Williams, in his short lifetime and very short career, achieved more than any other songwriter or performer could hope to create in 3 full lifetimes. And even in his tragedy, he is a continuing source of inspiration to millions of music lovers around the world. Today, just as it is in the early days of the 50s, Hank Williams speaks with the voice and feeling of the people. And in our hearts, Hank Williams' golden dream will live forever.